we're going to give you guys players that we are not drafting. We hate these players. We will never draft them based on their ADP and other factors. Just we think you should stay away from these players. We're going to give you 5 players each and, talk about it. I'll get started. My first guy is TJ Hawkinson. His ADP on sleepers of 43.7. He's going the middle of the 4th round. I just think having guys underneath him like George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, Darren Waller, Evan Ingram. Then you go into the later rounds of the draft. You got Chiggy, you got Tyler Higbee, you got Greg Dulcich. I just think there's so much tight end value down the draft board that you don't have to spend a 4th round pick on TJ Hawkinson.
I agree.
I'm surprised at that. I kind of like drafting TJ Hawkinson. I think he could finish as high as 2 in tight ends.
No, TJ Hawkinson's cool for me, but he's top 5 tight end. But I agree with Chris. The 4th round's a bit of a stretch for him.
Going as the 3rd tight end off the board, I just don't want to draft him there.
Yeah, me personally, I wouldn't take him as the 3rd tight end.
Because he's not like Travis Kelce, we know, like, barring anything crazy, is going to be the tight end 1.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Andrews, we know, barring anything crazy, is going to be the tight end 2. But TJ Hawkinson going as the tight end 3 in the draft, he's not a lock to be the tight end 3.
3 to 6 could be interchangeable.
Right. So I'd rather draft one of those other guys later on,
right,
when they could finish just as high.
Waller, Kittle, and Hawk are all on the same level.
I think Pitts is in that tier too.
Pitts.
I think Goddard's in that tier too, honestly.
And Goddard. So even 8.
I even think you could really make the case that Evan Ingram's in that tier too.
I love
Evan Ingram was great last year.
They just paid him.
Right. So, yeah, Hawkinson, I like Hawkinson, the player. I know I debated against him on the last episode, but, like, he's a good player. He's just going a little bit too high for my liking.
Mm-hmm.
If I was drafting that in the 5th or 6th round, like where Goddard and Waller go, like, sick. That's awesome ADP, but 4th round, too high.
All right. For my first pick, honestly, I'm going to go with another tight end. I'm going to go with George Kittle. He's getting drafted. ADP's 46, tight end 4. While, yeah, George Kittle's been really good past seasons, I feel like there's just too much in that offense this year. Too many mouths to feed, and they don't even have their quarterback figured out either. So that's another.
Well, I mean, we assume
it's going to be Brock Purdy.
It will.
And when Brock Purdy plays,
he got
George
Kittle. Kittle was his number 1.
George
option.
Kittle's is top 2 tight end in the NFL.
It's just, I feel like for where he's getting drafted, I feel like it's too risky.
Risky in terms of what?
Like, I just feel like there's too many mouths to feed in that offense. And honestly, that's why I have Deebo Samuel on my list as well. He's getting drafted 37th. He's the 16th wide receiver. There's just other players in that range that I would rather draft.
Deebo's also on my list, yeah.
Yeah, like...
Do we all have Deebo on our list?
I guess so.
Probably. Like, just receiver-wise, you could draft guys like DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, all in that range. I'd rather have all of those guys than Deebo Samuel. Like, that those guys are the number 1 in their offense. They have Brandon Ayuk on the 49ers. Who knows who's the number 1 receiver this year?
Right.
And like I said, Deebo and George Kittle, they're both going to take targets away from each other.
Yeah.
I just feel like that offense is very questionable this season in fantasy football.
Another receiver I'm staying away from. I know he's not getting drafted all too high, but Chris Godwin, man. His ADP is 62. They don't have a quarterback. Baker Mayfield.
They have your boy. Baker Mayfield's like top 3 in your eyes.
And then Godwin's not even the number 1 receiver there. Mike Evans is clearly better. I know Godwin has talent, and I know when Tom Brady was there, he was a reliable fantasy option. But going into the season, I don't trust that Bucs offense whatsoever. I don't even think Mike Evans finishes the season on the Bucs.
Really?
Yeah, really. I think it becomes that bad there.
I don't see why Mike Evans is like getting drafted 10 picks later than Chris Godwin. It really doesn't make sense to me.
I think Mike Evans is the most consistent receiver in the NFL.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's getting taken after Chris Godwin is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I don't think it's crazy that he's getting taken after him. It's just that there's a pretty good range between the two. Like 10 picks is a lot.
There should,
Right,
exactly.
A little more, honestly. It's 12 picks, the average. It's a whole round. I feel like that's kind of a big range for what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, just speaking of one of the players we just named, I have once again not being drafted all too high. 14 picks below Chris Godwin is Mike Evans. I have Mike Evans not being dragged. On my board personally, player who I'm not drafting. Yeah, ADP is at 76. We know Mike Evans as being the epitome of consistent with hitting 1,000 yards every season, being an elite red zone, elite deep ball threat. I think the lack of quarterback play is going to play a huge factor in that, and his role is going to become very limited when because let's say Baker Mayfield is the starter. I do not trust Baker Mayfield's arm for the deep balls that Mike Evans is used to, and I don't see them getting in the red zone very often. So
I
just-
disagree only because that ADP is not extremely high, and
I
I think
agree,
the
yeah.
upside of Mike Evans outweighs that, and I think the consistency of Mike Evans outweighs that. I think consistently being the number one target for the last 8 years
Mhm.
has really solidified that he will get balls. He will get targets, whether it's downfield, red zone. I know you don't see him going into the red zone all too often, but they're gonna be there, and the ball's gonna go to Mike Evans.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree. I kind of like drafting Mike Evans, honestly,
So he might actually have good value for where his ADP is.
but I can't see why people wouldn't want to draft him.
I definitely
Um,
understand.
me
I've never
personally,
drafted Mike
Yeah,
Evans.
me personally, I'm leaning away towards Mike Evans for those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So you're definitely out on Chris Godwin then too, right?
Yeah.
Or
So
okay.
Mike Evans' fantasy seasons as a whole are interesting. So Mike Evans, although as a whole are consistent, but game to game basis in fantasy, he'll give you 6 points, 7 points, and then drop a 40-point game. And then give you 11, 12, 30. Like, yeah, you live for those 30, 40-point games, but then he'll give you goose eggs for 3 weeks in a row. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
On a game to game basis, he's not so consistent in fantasy. In terms of a whole season, yes, he is consistent. He is the guy. But I
Yeah.
agree with Ortiz in that sense.
Yeah, literally looking at last season, last 3 games. Week 16, he put up 5.9 points in PPR leagues. Week 17, 48.7.
Right. It's not game to game is not consistent with him.
Nah.
All right. So the next guy I'm not drafting is newly acquired, new situation. You might say he's playing with the best offensive line in all football. I'm not drafting DeAndre Swift. Going as the running back 23 in drafts. I just don't like the situation. We know Philly has used the running back by committee for all of this time. DeAndre Swift is a guy who has struggled to stay on the field consistently. They brought in Rashad Penny. They're talking up Kenneth Gainwell all training camp, all offseason. And then the guys going after him, I just trust their role more. You know, you got James Conner going after him, Rashad White, Cam Akers, James Cook. All of these guys who project to be the undisputed running back one in their offense are all going after him. So I'm staying away from DeAndre Swift.
I
I,
agree.
I have him on my list as well.
Yeah, I do too. He's getting drafted way too high, in my opinion.
Go
There's-
us.
And I think Rashad Penny has a chance to be better than him this season. And by the way, neither of those guys are going to lead the team in rushing. It's going to be Jalen Hurts.
Of course. I
Yeah.
mean, and with these two running backs, they're both made of glass too. So
And they're really talking. I know we trolled Trunks for the Ken Gainwell pick of breakout players, but they've been talking him up all offseason. He might enter the season as the featured back. I
Yep.
mean, no one's really going to be featured in that offense, but the guy who starts the game getting the carries, it might end up being Ken Gainwell. So
I feel like the other guys you could draft in that range, running back wise, they're all more. What's the word?
they have a more
They're more
secure
safe.
role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Cam Akers, he has a better role. James Conner, better role. You know?
Rashad White.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
So another
with you
running
on
back that I don't particularly trust at the moment is Kenneth Walker. I'm not taking Kenneth Walker.
mm-hmm.
They just picked Zach Charbonnet in the second round. And I know that's not the biggest deal, but I think Zach Charbonnet is a very complete running back. And I think going into the season, hurt, possibly missing week 1, I think Kenneth Walker has a chance to lose a lot of touches this season.
Yeah, especially where he's getting drafted.
Right.
know?
I wouldn't his ADP is 37. And I'm not comfortable taking Kenneth Walker late second, mid third round. I'm not taking him in that spot personally.
I like Ken Walker this year. I do think he's going a little bit too early, so he's not a guy I'm going out of my way to draft. But you know, if he falls a few spots after his ADP, like I'm cool with it. I just think, yes, in theory, going into the season hurt, they spend, you know, premium draft capital on another running back. That should concern you. But my thing with Ken Walker, the reason why I would draft him if I am going to draft him, I just think his talent outweighs all of that. I think he's such a talented running back. He's an elite runner of the football. He finished off last season so strong that I really don't think he's going to miss a beat. I think he's going to come in and still be the bell cow role in that offense. And I think the Zach Charbonnet pick was just for insurance. I don't think he's going to lose carries to Zach Charbonnet if he's healthy. But I do agree he is getting drafted a little bit too high.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm gonna go with another running back. We talked about him before. Going Brees Hall. His ADP is 31st.
I think that changes as of this morning, though. I really
it
do
might.
think it does.
But even I don't even know where I would draft Brees Hall, even if it does change. Like looking at these rankings, there's guys that are getting drafted a full round afterwards that I would rather have, like Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones. I just think it's too risky to draft a guy like Brees Hall in the third round, second round, third round.
I also have Brees Hall on my list. So I'm going to list you guys, the running backs that are being drafted after him, that I would draft ahead of him. All of these guys I would draft before I draft Brees Hall. Travis Etienne, Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, Dameon Pierce, Ken Walker, Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, Rashad White, James Conner. I'm drafting all those guys before I draft Brees Hall.
I agree.
So he's going way too early in drafts.
Mm-hmm.
Way too early.
If he was coming in healthy and they didn't just sign Dalvin Cook, yes, he completely deserves that spot and probably even higher.
He would be higher. Yeah.
But that's just not the case, and I could not justify taking him before all the guys you just listed.
And then even when you look at the receivers, like, we just did that mock draft. Brees Hall was there for me in the third round if I wanted to draft him, but the Chris Olaves, all those guys I'm drafting before I draft Brees Hall.
Yeah.
I'm not. He might be the number one guy on my list that I will not draft him this year.
Me too. He is. Yeah.
And I think in most leagues he's gonna fall, and you might be able to get a value for him.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be shocked if in a league where it's not computers drafting, not a mock draft where you have actual people. I'd be shocked if he goes in the third round. Honestly.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Keys, who do you got?
My bad. I was looking at something. Another player I have here is specifically for Sully. Actually, I am not drafting George Pickens this year. His ADP is at a 79, which is reasonable for I guess your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on a team. But me personally, I'm staying away from him because he's very inconsistent. He doesn't create enough separation when it comes to being a wide receiver. He does make the very good catches in traffic, but he's always going to be in traffic because he cannot create separation. And his yards after the catch are another big problem. He doesn't really do anything with the football after he catches it. He kind of just does nothing. He averaged 2 yards per catch last season, 2 yards after the catch. And I'm just staying away from George Pickens.
All right.
Okay.
Nice.
Oh,
George Pickens.
So another guy I have on my list, it's a receiver, and his name is Deebo Samuel. Currently going as the wide receiver 16. I just think he was phased out of that offense last year once Brock Purdy became the starter and Christian McCaffrey got there. Brandon Ayuk looked like the better fantasy option there. And, he had that great season, but that was just such an outlier. He won't be used like that as a running back, as this utility guy like that ever again. He'll never have 9 rushing touchdowns in a season ever again. He's going before Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, all those guys. Just a huge list of guys I would draft before I draft Deebo Samuel.
We all had Deebo.
Chris Baum. We talked about him
while you were in the bathroom. We all had Deebo. But no,
Yeah,
you gave a good explanation.
He did. Yeah. My next guy, I'm gonna go with DeAndre Hopkins. He's getting drafted 48th, 21st wide receiver off the board. There's other guys in that range, wide receiver wise, like Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Drake London, Christian Watson. I feel like all those guys are safer and they don't have the injury history that Hopkins has. The past 2 seasons, he's been pretty banged up. And besides that, he's going to a new offense. He's got Ryan Tannehill as quarterback. We don't know what that's going to look like, really. I don't really like DeAndre Hopkins where he's getting drafted. If he falls in drafts, then yeah, I would take him. If he falls like an extra round or something like that, I'd take a flyer on him. But I don't know. I don't like drafting there. No.
I don't love DeAndre Hopkins' draft position, but I definitely don't hate it. A guy going as the wide receiver 20, who a realistic ceiling for him is to be the wide receiver 1 overall. He's that talented, and he's going to an offense where he's going to get unlimited targets. We saw what Ryan Tannehill did with A.J. Brown there in that offense, that run-first offense with all the play action. Now you're adding a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, who you can make the case is the most talented receiver in all of football. So I think getting that guy as a wide receiver 20 with that type of upside, I don't know if I'd say it's a steal. He's not a guy who I'm going out of my way to draft, but I definitely don't hate his draft position.
I feel like we also saw something like that with Julio Jones, though. No, I guess
Julio
in
was
that,
washed.
I guess at that point AJ Brown was also still there, but
Julio was washed too.
Who is he really competing for targets with? He's competing with Treylon Burks, who hasn't proved anything in this league.
Right.
yeah,
Woods is there or no?
No,
he's
Robert
on the
Woods in
Texans.
So
Chig is there. Like, there's really no competition for targets there. And like I said, we saw what this offense could do for an elite deep ball wide receiver with A.J. Brown. So
Mhm.
I definitely don't hate the DeAndre Hopkins.
I'm also not drafting Treylon Burks. I don't know if anybody was, but I'm not.
Nah,
I'm also not drafting.
Does everyone still have at least one guy left on their list?
I was
No, I
about to
said
say my last
5.
guy.
You said you're 5?
Everyone else said my 5, but I was gonna just take a gamble and I was just looking at all the receivers, and someone who I'm staying away from this year because he's going in my range from that 8th pick range is a Cooper Kupp. Weird enough to say. It's hard to draft a wide receiver in the first round like that, where he's supposed to be your centerpiece. Your first round pick's obviously supposed to be the centerpiece of your team, the guy who's going to lead you to a championship. And Cooper Kupp, it's hard to come back with a lingering hamstring injury. It's just one of those red flags for me personally while I'm staying away from him. But I'm not taking anything away from him. He's a generational wide receiver with the way he puts up numbers. Me personally, I'm just not taking him in drafts.
I could see it. I mean, I like Cooper Kupp. I think he's guaranteed to get all the targets there. I think he's guaranteed to be the centerpiece of that offense. I think maybe not as high. Like I probably wouldn't take him top 2
no,
personally.
he's
but
like 5th pick.
But I think
4th,
5th, 6th pick, there's just not an overabundance of running backs that I would take in that spot. I think by that time, McCaffrey's gone. Eckler might be gone. The next up is you're talking about Bijan, Nick Chubb, Tony Pollard. And Cooper Kupp, I think, is going to average more points than all those guys.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, Kupp's floor, if he's healthy, is the wide receiver 4.
Yeah.
That's his floor.
Yeah.
Absolute floor.
It just depends if he's healthy or not.
So I'm not drafting Joe Mixon.
Wow,
I'm not.
that's crazy.
I'm not doing it.
Why?
I just, from the inconsistency that I've seen from Joe Mixon and the injuries, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. I've had Joe Mixon before, and I've been disappointed. I haven't been happy as a fantasy manager of him. I'm not doing it this year.
I love Joe Mixon this year, especially where he's getting drafted. Like you saw in the mock drafts, what I get him 4th round.
He's
Third or fourth
average
round?
39.
I love him there personally. I feel like he could be an RB1.
I just feel like there's other guys, bro. I feel like I'm
Who
taking
in that range?
I'm
I feel
taking
like he's number
Gibbs.
1 for me.
I'm taking ETN. I'm taking Aaron Jones. I'm probably taking Kenneth Walker still.
I don't know. I'm taking.
But
Mixon
those are
over
all
those
guys who go before him.
Not particularly. Aaron Jones goes after.
Aaron Jones is the only one who goes after him.
And
Kenneth Walker goes after.
I'm arguably taking
After
Mixon before
Mixon?
them.
Yeah.
Ken Walker goes
They're-
after Mixon?
Yeah.
No, it's before.
No,
He's before him.
definitely before.
Anyway, I don't like Mixon this year.
So the player that I'm avoiding at all costs this year, Mike Williams. I will not draft Mike Williams this year.
Yep.
Currently going as the wide receiver 30. I'm scared of Mike Williams. The injury history concerns me a shit ton. Drafting Quentin Johnston scares me a shit ton. And the guys going after him, I just like more. Hollywood Brown's going 1 pick after him. Mike Evans is going 3 picks after him. Christian Kirk going after him. Deontay Johnson going after him. Those are just guys who I think their targets are more secure, and also they don't have the injury history that completely scares me away.
And I think on that team, Eckler and Keenan are guaranteed targets.
Right.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. I think Mike Williams ends up being the odd man out, especially with Quentin Johnson hopping on